Okay, well, welcome to the NAPI team meeting for June 7th, 2018. As usual, we're going to go through the actions in our current milestone and see where we're doing. Just a sec. Sorry, now we're going to go through the actions in our current milestone and see where Okay, I don't need to listen to us again. First one is the blog to coincide with 6.x backport availability. I did fill in some content there, and here actually I'll post the link in case some of you guys want to take a look. I think Arunish was then going to fill in the other pieces. So let me just find that in.
Hey, Michael, Arnish just
Hello.
messaged saying that he's not going to be able to make the meeting, but he'll email you and sync up with the blog later.
Okay. Oh, I think I sent that just to you. So all panelists. So here's the link for the blog we're working on if you want to take a look at the section that we've got filled in so far. That's ongoing. Related to that as well, I did do some work this week to put together the 8.x backport to remove the switch, not the switch, but the warning.
Okay.
And, it didn't look clean, land cleanly, so we had to do a backport. First CI didn't pass, so I've run another one anyway. Hoping to get that landed today, so we're ready. 8.x is though a little bit blocked up, so I'm not sure when that'll come out, but at least hopefully we'll be ready. The next issue is create workshop for Node Summit. So Jim, why don't you bring us up to date there?
Jim, you're muted, I think.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Yeah, so we have up there a preliminary set of slides. Let me see if I can find the page and put that in the chat. Okay, this is where we're working. So up here, we now have a preliminary set of slides that are there for people's comments. And then Gabriel, I've been including your comments onto the tutorial pages. So thank you for your feedback there. I am thinking that what we may want to do is put these slides onto some sort of online slide hosting site. And then that way we can collaborate as a group on the slides, and then we'd have them available not only for Node Summit, but for potential future workshops as well. So does anybody have experience with online slide hosting sites?
We did
Google Slides or whatever that is.
Yeah, I think that one works fine. You can then export it, I think, into Microsoft PowerPoint.
Yep, and OpenOffice too.
Okay. So should I go ahead and post these on Google Slides and then make it publicly available?
Yep.
Yeah, I think so.
Good. We can collaborate on it there.
Okay.
The only thing that might be useful in the outline would be like how much time we think each of these will have.
Okay.
So just like a bracket, workshop schedule, if that's like 1 minute or whatever. Because I suspect like the online tutorials will actually be the bulk of it, right?
Exactly, Michael. So I'm thinking the introductory comments might take no more than 15 minutes.
Right.
So, and then I'm hoping also that Google Slides has space for speaker notes.
Yes, it does.
Okay, so then hopefully we can collaborate on what we want for the speaker notes.
Sure.
Okay. And then if people have comments, now's the time to put them on the issue. And then I'll post on the issue the URL for the Google Slides.
Yeah, I'm just taking a very quick read through while we're here. Yeah, it's looking like a pretty good overview. Okay, yeah, looks great.
Okay.
Okay, so right. Anything else you want to talk about on this one?
Nope. That's all I have on that, Michael.
Okay, no, it looks like you're pushing that forward quite well. I think that's great. Okay, so next thing on the list is documenting guidance on adding APIs to any API. So I think Hitesh, you had the task for that, right?
Yes. I still need to post that as a gist or onto the issue.
Yeah,
I
I
think
think
Kyle posted it as a gist.
last time we had a fairly good discussion, and I think Kyle was going to relay a few things to you on that front.
Yeah, him and I have not had a chance to sync up on that. We'll do that today.
Okay, that'd be good because like the key thing I think is we discussed the concept of them going in as experimental.
Yep, that
So
makes
we're going to have
sense.
another define that basically, you can use those experimental ones if you put the hash define, and then when we take them out of under the hash define, that's when we add them to like, part of the API as in this number.
That makes sense to me. That's kind of what we do for Chakra Core today for our JSRT APIs.
Okay, sounds good, because otherwise the management of the adding, like when things were supported and what version, actually would have been kind of tricky.
Yep, agreed.
And related to that, Gabriel, that's what I was referring to on the other PR when I was thinking the new APIs to help you use, the thread safe APIs.
Yep.
It would be nice if we could add them, but under that experimental define.
Right. So we need Kyle's PR first.
We either need Kyle's PR first, or potentially we can add that hash define as part of yours, as long as we agree on what it is, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Just so that we don't necessarily have to like wait to land yours until the other one lands.
Correct. Yeah, I did update the PR, so there is so like to start I went with nappy underscore experimental as a separate pound define. I looked at doing it as a high version number so that it could just be a version number, but that kind of had a circular reference in terms of includes. In order to have the experimental version number defined, you had to include a file, and yet you need to define it before you include the file. So
okay, so basically it's just that here's another hash define that you need to use.
Right, you declare your nappy version, and then you say experimental, which is the only thing I didn't like about that, and I was looking at ways to maybe update the header so that like if you declare experimental, it defines. I'm still thinking about how to do that. Like if you specify experimental, it seems like you also want the highest version of everything, like the highest version number.
Yes, that's the only way it really makes sense.
Correct. Yeah. So I just haven't come up with a clean way to do that. We already sort of have a hard-coded. If you don't define a nappy version, we have our default defined there. I have to. What I haven't figured out yet is because we don't have the official current version number in the header file on purpose, so I'm not sure I wasn't sure how to keep that in sync, right? Like if we said if you define experimental, then forcibly define nappy version to the highest supported, basically. I guess we could forcibly push it to some really high number, and that would by definition make everything in. Like we could say, just max int or something.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
You could alias that with another. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4 experimental.
Well, the problem with that is I can't do that because because the first thing you include from Node when you're using nappy is node api.h.
Yeah.
So that special version the number wouldn't actually exist.
I see what you mean. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so that's why I was thinking we still have the separate nappy experimental, but at the top of node api.h we say if def nappy experimental pound define nappy version.
Oh yes.
Really high number.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, we might want another guard that says and if undefined, that version number.
Yeah, I'll probably put it in with the. I already have the if and def nappy version, and we define it to nappy version 3. So I'll mix it in with that. I'm putting comments on my own PR to note these things.
So the question is, How quickly do we think we can get that PR landed? And if the
The big
answer
thing,
is,
yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
sorry, the big thing I'm looking at now, the thing I need to wrap up is the documentation. I did add a new field to the experimental APIs in the documentation, but I haven't figured out what to represent that as in the script when it's generating it. The prevailing thought was to just have it be the literal string experimental. Like I added a new field to the YAML
Yep.
of nappy experimental true. I still haven't just because I didn't necessarily want to conflate version and experimental in case we ever wanted to do both for some reason.
Yep.
I just haven't figured out what to make that look like in the documentation. Like the simplest answer is probably that we just say in that versions in the string where we put the versions today, we just say experimental is one of those items. But I didn't know if it made sense to put some kind of like bar or something.
Like I mean, it's almost like you want the version or experimental if it's actually experimental. Because I don't know, is there any case where it can be experimental and there's a version? I don't think so.
I don't think so. And that's where like maybe it makes sense. I didn't necessarily want to conflate the two pieces of YAML, but we could make it that like experimental would override version at worst case if that's the if conflating them seems like a bad idea. Like, because one is a list of numbers and the other, or a list of quote unquote version numbers. So just throwing like the word experimental in there is kind of is a magic value that I didn't necessarily want to go down that path.
But I think for display, like it's not helpful to say it's version 1 and not experimental.
Mm-hmm.
I think so I could agree that having them separate in the YAML is okay, but once it shows, it should be like, here's the version it's supported in, experimental. Oh, no versions.
Right. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I can experiment with a couple of options for that. I don't think it's too far away from landing. I think I've corralled the new APIs and updated the tests. So the tests for the experimental APIs now need to have the nappy experimental defined, which makes sense because they're experimental APIs. So I think I have fixed those. I'm doing a local test run, and then I'm going to work on the documentation. Okay. Like I say, I think I've done the data work on the documentation. It's just a matter of figuring out what it should look like.
But I guess I'm wondering for as opposed to waiting, is there a concern if Gabriel just takes the define that you have and guards his new methods with that in his PR?
I have no problems. I have no problems with that.
Gabriel, does that make sense to you?
Okay, so then I guess I would surround my stuff with if def nappy experimental, right?
Correct. Yeah, just as a first step. We wouldn't necessarily have all the plumbing or documentation in for it. I'm not complete. Like, is this for like V8 or is this for V10? Like, what's the?
Well, this is context? Just Gabriel has a PR that we'd like to land because it's pretty much ready to land. So just to not have it just being blocked. It would also let us then there's some people who had interest. We could say, on master, you can go ahead and try it. Just add this line.
Yeah, and that would be in line with the future workflow anyway.
Yep. No, it's exactly in line with it. So I don't see any problems with that. And it'll actually make it, if you add the APIs to the bottom of the file and you surround them in an nappy experimental, that'll make it a lot easier for me to find them too when I land the real PR.
Yeah, you'll need to merge. You'll have a little bit of merge work there, but I think it
should be trivial. It's
good to do, and then hopefully, if you're only a week out, then it'll be a week. Then once we have the explanation says and here's how it works, because we probably want a little bit more review time to get that part right.
Correct. Yeah, I'm pretty close. I'll try. No, the goal is to get the documentation wrapped up today, and the logic for if you put experimental, use a really high version. So yeah.
Okay. Good. So next one is SQLite NAPI ports. So I know, Anisha, we had a bit of a discussion, but I wasn't quite sure how to help you. So you were going to reach out to Gabriel or I think was it Gabriel who mentioned this? Maybe Kyle too.
I hadn't gotten a chance to reach out. I was hoping maybe during this meeting they
Okay.
could clarify a little bit how exactly I'm supposed to use. I'm supposed to get the JavaScript object for date and regular expressions without the.
It's a property of the global object.
The global, like the V8 global.
Yeah, like we have nappy get global, right? And then it gets the global from the environment, and then that global has a property called date with a capital D, and then that is the constructor for date.
Okay, so it's just DATE.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, and the regex is just REGEX.
Yes.
It's REGEXP, right, with a capital.
Yeah, right. Regex.
Yep.
With a capital R. Okay, so it
capital R, capital E.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, capital R, capital E, and then
Reg.
EXP. GEXP. Okay. I thought it was something like that, but I couldn't find anything that actually listed what was on there.
Yeah, and then you'll use nappy construct object, and then you'll use nappy get property to get like if you need like the exec function off of it.
Well, it's that we need to compare against the constructor.
Oh, okay. Then that should
right. Like
be...
basically, we want to do like an instance of these guys.
Yeah. Oh, got it. Yeah, then that's even easier. Cool.
Okay.
Would it make sense to add these things to Node add-on API? Not necessarily any API, but just Sugar.
So yeah, so that there's two. There is an open issue to say should we add them to an API, and then even separately we could just add them to the Sugar part.
Yeah.
I guess, and the question is, should we be?
How often are these things used? Like, I mean, especially natively.
I think date and regex are probably not uncommon. Like in the case of SQLite, it's basically saying, well, I want to put something in the database, so I want to know whether they're one of these common types.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm hesitant to make it part of Nappy, but Node add-on API, I don't really have a strong opinion.
There is one argument in favor of adding it to an API, which is that you don't want to keep having to retrieve the constructor off the global all the time. If we made it a part of an API, you could cache that in the environment. I'm not sure if Node add-on API has any kind of state, right?
Yeah.
Because it's just Sugar, right?
Yeah, I mean, the worry that I have about this is that then, like, does that open the floodgates for adding every conceivable global class?
Yeah.
So like map, set, like we had actually a similar discussion in Chakra Core, and we ended up siding on the side of, well, except for, I think the only exception we made was Promise, which I think an API already has, because Promise has more sugar about getting the resolver and the rejector, but for stuff that didn't have that native hook requirement.
Yes, true. Actually, this caching can happen on the SQLite side, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
I think if the performance is the concern, then you can directly use an API and do the caching. But if you want simplicity, use Node add-on API.
Yeah, even with Node add-on API, right? I mean, we do have references, so you can just create a reference for your own code base.
So I think we were going down the path of actually just implementing it directly in SQLite to do the, get the global, put it on, and then documenting that as the way to do it. And then I would see if we get feedback that somehow like, well, wait a sec, for performance reasons or for some other reason, we really should add it to one of the two, we could do that.
Does V8, I guess V8 has shortcuts for like is date, right? Like it has one of those on value. So that would be faster if needed.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, I can imagine in the case of SQLite, I mean, it will have many rows, all of which might be dates, So this could happen in a really tight loop and sort of interfere with the performance.
Yeah, although I doubt there would be too many of them. Like you said, you could cache it in SQLite.
Yes, but doing a generic instance of is still slower than just doing is date.
True.
Right. And if it's hot enough, then you might really hurt for that is date that you don't have.
Although okay, say you have 4 or 5 dates in your insert. Is that still going to compare to the request to the database to get it inserted?
I don't know how well SQLite performs, but we've just had a PR for function call overhead, so this would contribute to that, right? Like it would be similar in nature to that, in that, inserting a single row that has a date in it is now more expensive than it could be if we had this API in place.
Yeah, it's just the same argument of like, where do you draw the line?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's true. Yeah, well, these things are database types, right? Whereas weak maps are not database types. So this is data. A weak map is sort of it's a class. Date is a class only insofar as it needs more functionality than a primitive class, but it is pretty much primitive. So yes, it is a slope. I agree, but perhaps, just perhaps, and I don't feel strongly about this, we can go this much down that slope, right? Because I mean, the other globals, they like proxy. Proxy is a global, right? And I mean, those provide sort of like meta programming features and JavaScript specific stuff for which there are native equivalents already, right?
I guess Chalk, one data point though, is you're saying, Kyle, that Chalk Recorder hasn't found it necessary to give a shortcut.
So far, not. We haven't. I mean, it depends on, like, we haven't had a specific request for it that I'm aware of. Are you, Hitesh, for like, nope, especially fast path to finding a type of an object?
No, I haven't heard of any request on that front.
Not to say, like, so, yeah.
Right. I'm just tempted to leave it till we see that, like, if Anisha gets SQLite running and then the test suite runs half the speed or something, we'll look at it and say, wait a second.
Yep, I think that's a reasonable approach. I think, until we know that we have a performance problem here, I would bias. I'm fine with adding things to Node add-on API because it's sugar, but I think the burden of adding something to any API should be a little higher.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll Anisha, once it's working, we should run the test just to see if we see any performance overhead. If not, then we'll quickly turn that into some documentation that says, here's how you can do these kind of things.
Sure. Yep.
Okay. Sounds good. Investigate use of pre-build with an API. I think, Jim, I've seen you've done some work on that. Do you want to just bring us up to speed?
Yeah, I'll post the issue. So from last week, I refined the proposed solution based on a discussion Gabriel and I had. And this week I was able to delve much deeper into the implementation, how it actually works. It has quite a few parallels to Node pre-JIP. So it's looking very familiar to me. So I have posted an issue. I've posted an issue on pre-build saying that we're planning to do this work, asking for comments. And I've received an encouraging comment from one of the main maintainers. He says it looks like a good solution to him or her. So I think early next week, if I don't receive any negative comments, I'm going to start the implementation. So that's my plan there. And if you have comments about my implementation, the group here, then this would be a good opportunity to raise any concerns that you might have.
The one thing I'll just say before I forget is, should we cover, like, maybe, I don't know if this will be done, but like cover Node pre-JIP in the workshop? This comes down to how much time we have, but
yeah, I would like I'd like to have a Node pre-jip tutorial and a pre-build tutorial available for the workshop. We might say, hey, they're available if they're of interest to you, and then we could be prepared to answer questions or help people along the process there.
Right. It'd be like, hey, here's some, you may not have time, but here's another, after the first two, here's another couple you could, okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So maybe not. Yeah, we might briefly, I can add the brief mentions to them in the slides as additional tools.
Yeah, like for fast people, or I don't know what the terminology right is. like if you get through them really fast, here's another couple things you can get into.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we might actually have people that have already converted to an API, and this would be their next step before they publish.
Okay.
Who knows?
Yeah.
So I think we have a few minutes. If you don't mind, it wouldn't be bad. I'm just gonna.
Okay, sure.
Summary. Do you want to sort of take us through a quick high level view?
Okay. So yeah, what I'm trying to do is do the minimal modifications necessary to support an API. Unlike Node pre-jip, pre-build is designed to do multiple builds. Node pre-jip is designed to do one build. So I'll be piggybacking on parts of the implementation that are already there. We had discussed earlier the idea of adding, the developer needs to communicate to pre-build what builds it wants. Now, in Node pre-jip, that's done through the package.json file, which was a natural way to do it for Node pre-jip. Here, we're taking the approach that you would specify it in your runtime parameter and in your target parameter. So what I'm proposing is with the runtime parameter to the command line tool, you would specify that you're requesting an API build. And then under target, you can specify the specific NAPI versions that you wish built. And then the code I add will make sure that happens for you.
For the runtime parameter, like you have the question there, Node API or an API. I think I prefer Node API. Just
Node.
Sorry, Node NAPI is what you.
Okay, Node dash. Okay, good, Michael. Okay.
Just because, like, I could see needing an Electron dash NAPI.
Okay, very good. Should I include a hyphen in the NAPI part, or just leave it unhyphenated?
I think a single hyphen looks nice to my eyes. I don't know what anybody else thinks.
Okay.
Yeah. If there's a hyphen between Node and an API, then yeah, let's not add a second one.
Okay. Very good. Okay.
So then would the default be like Node V8?
The default is Node, which would default to NaN.
Okay.
Yeah, if you don't specify runtime parameter, it defaults to Node.
Okay.
Node WebKit is, just out of interest, is
NW, I think is what they call it today. It's an alternative to Electron.
Right. Okay. So the NW, I've seen the NW, just haven't seen it be expanded out. Okay, got it. Okay, sorry, I interrupted you there. You're at the runtime.
Yeah. So, and then under target, you would specify one or more target parameters for this. In this case, it'd be the NAPI version against which you wish the builds created.
Now, so there you have a question.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, Michael, you're pointing it out. So if they do not include a target, but they're requesting an NAPI build, then I would do one build, and I could do it against version 1 or version 2, I imagine.
I think version 3 is the one we backported to all the levels, right? Gabriel, is that?
Sure. Yeah, I believe so.
So I think we should make it 3.
Default to 3. Okay, perfect. Okay. And then the developer would have the option of building against 1 and 2 if they chose to.
Yeah.
Okay. The all parameter doesn't apply in our case. If they're doing an NAPI build, I'm just going to build whatever they're asking to be built. I'm not going to build against node 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up. But I'm just going to build the ones they request.
Can they request more than one in the target?
Yeah, they can if they
Okay.
have multiple target parameters. And then the backend parameter is not clear to me. The backends apply to Electron and Node WebKit. My experience is with Node JIP, which is the only backend that Node pre-JIP uses. So I am not clear. I'm not clear in my mind at this point what it would mean to. Oh wait, no, I'm sorry, I don't have a list of the backends here. There are two other backends, and they escape me at the moment. Should I take a moment here to look up what they are?
I'm okay without knowing the list. I only know that most modules are built with JIP, so.
Yeah, let me just take a look here. Okay, so the back end, let's see.
Oh, that sounds like the build tool.
Yeah, CMake. They have a CMake.
Okay. So that may actually be orthogonal to us because the target decides what headers to get, right?
Right.
And so
okay.
it doesn't matter what you're building with as long as you're building against the right headers.
Okay.
I think it should be orthogonal to us.
Okay. When I looked at the tool, they have these backends, and I have not gotten into it deep enough to understand what the backends are. But the backends are actually N API modules. One of the backends is called Node-JIP. The other one is called Node-Ninja. And then the third one is NW-JIP.
Yeah.
And then they've added another one called CMake-JS. So I'm not familiar with these other backends. So I can't guarantee compatibility with those. But I don't know what and maybe I'll have more to report next week on the backends. Maybe that's the best thing to do.
Do they have tests for all the backends?
I'm sorry, Gabriel.
Do they have tests for that like in pre-build?
I would need to look at that.
Yeah, so that would be one way of figuring out whether we're going to have any backend specific problems.
Okay.
I think we shouldn't, because it's two different steps. One is to set up the environment with the right version of the headers, and the second step is to build the module, assuming the first step succeeded, right?
Uh-huh.
So we simply influence the way in which the environment is set up, right? Like, where do you grab the headers from?
Yes.
Right? So it should be orthogonal. That's why I'm saying it should be orthogonal, but you never know, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah, certainly my guess is the same as Gabriel, that it's like the NW-JIP is something like they needed to do something special to get it to work in their environment.
Okay. So if I set up the environment correctly, then it should work on those other backends.
It should, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Then just like I did for Node pre-JIP, we need a mechanism to communicate to the C and C++ code the version of NAPI against which the code is being built. And so I will use the same technique that I used on Node pre-JIP to communicate that. So that should work.
So that node build version would then result in the define being set appropriately, so you get just the right APIs.
Exactly.
And the name of the define should actually coincide with what Kyle will have in his PR, I think, right?
Well, this I think is different, because it would be helpful for me to have clarification on this. So I believe what this is communicating is the version against which you're being built. So if you have like a polyfill, it gives your code a chance to use either your polyfill or now the native API that's now supported by NAPI. So I think it's a different concept, but I'm not exactly certain.
Okay, I can imagine people. Yeah, I mean, it does kind of coincide though, because if you have an API version 2, but you need something from version 3, you could polyfill it until it's available,
Right.
or maybe copy the stuff out of experimental, and then if you don't like the signature because we decided to break the ABI because it was still experimental, you can keep your polyfill.
Right.
But I think it makes sense to me that this is the one that you're built, like you're using a VM that supports version 3, for example, versus I don't know, because your code needs to know which version.
Yeah, you want to avoid calling a function that has only appeared in version 3 if you do not wish to support version 3. And in fact, the compile should fail if you do accidentally.
Right. But it's almost like that should be in the code of your module, not in something that's building it for you.
No, but I mean that's exactly what Kyle's PR is doing, right? It is intentionally restricting the contents of Node.API.h.
Right, but I guess what I was saying is you should have the thing that sets that define in your code. So even if you do like an npm install and don't use node pre-jip or node pre-build, your module does the same thing. So
okay, yeah, yes. Okay, you can actually daisy chain it though, right? Because in Node API we have if not defined NAPI version, then define NAPI version number 3 or number defined NAPI version 3, right? So you could do the same thing in the add-on. If not defined NAPI version, then define NAPI version 2. And then if you're building without Node pre-jip or without pre-build, then you will be defining it before including Node API directly. But if you're building with the tool, then it will be defined on the command line. So by the time the preprocessor processes your file, it will already be defined. But in order to make this daisy chaining happen, the name of the preprocessor directive on the command line has to be the same as the name of the preprocessor directive in Node API.h. So that's why I'm saying it would make sense to have it be the same name, because then you can daisy chain it. Otherwise, you can still daisy chain it if it has a different name, but then you have to say, if node pre-build NAPI version, if not defined node pre-build NAPI version, then number defined NAPI version something, Otherwise, define NAPI version something else.
Right, but this I think from what the existing thing is, you basically say I want to build a binary that's against 2 and I want to build a binary that's against 3, right?
Yes. And the way you do that without node pre-build and with Kyle's patch is you number define it before you include node API.h. But whether you number define it by editing the text file and inserting the text before including node API.h, or whether you number define it by editing your binding.jip and adding it to the defines, is irrelevant. You achieve the same thing, right? The bottom line is it ends up being defined before you include. So now we can create a synergy with node pre-build because it can provide that number define as if you had written it in the binding.jip.
Right. So Jim, I guess in terms of the usage you had here, did the end user have to put it into binding.jip manually themselves?
Yes.
And does any of the framework or plumbing use it?
Which framework or plumbing are we talking about?
Well, like the pre-build, the stuff that pre-build is doing. No. So this is purely like it's almost like the user has to manually put it into the pre-build configuration anyway.
Right.
Yeah, or specify it on the command line.
By anything else.
Right.
Well, how does that work if you've got two targets, like NAPI 2 and NAPI 3?
Then under node pre-jip, which we've got going, it fires off two builds, and it sets this define ultimately it's communicated into the CNC++ code. The NAPI build version, for the first build, it would be 2.
Right.
And then on the second build, it would be 3.
Right. Okay. So it's not this thing is inserted by pre-build is what you're suggesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. So when Node pregip, which is I've got going, it communicates that version, that build version into Node.js, and then Node.js passes uses the binding.js to communicate it into the CNC++ code.
Yeah, no, I think Gabriel's right then that we should probably line up the name.
Okay, but then if in Node pregip we have NAPI build version, and now in Node prebuild we're going to have NAPI version, then that's an inconsistency between Node pregip and Node prebuild.
Well, here's the thing: is this is just a recommendation. The module designer, module maintainer can choose whatever define they want. So if you wanted to use Kyle's version, you're welcome to do that.
Okay, and is this true? Is this true for is this true for Node pregip as well? That they can name their constant anything they want?
Correct. Yeah.
Oh, good, because then they can make it coincide with what Kyle's going to land.
Correct. Yes.
Oh,
right.
That's great.
We should just update the recommendation to document that.
Okay.
Yes.
So what? Can somebody post what it should be onto the chat?
Sure. Yeah, it should be NAPI version.
Okay.
So Kyle, that's going to be what we're going to use to limit it down, right?
Yeah, I believe that already existed anyway. Like that's a pre-existing define that I took. That's how we were previously defining the NAPI version anyway.
Yeah.
Like that's already checked in the node version.h, I believe.
Yep.
Right, but but what we're talking about here should be something that the module developer defines. Right, like it's kind of like it's a desired NAPI version, not
correct. But like I based it on the same. I based like the one we use is based on the same version number. That's why in our if you include node internals.h, it already defines NAPI version as part of it. So that's why I just kept using the same one for this.
Yeah, and I think it makes sense conceptually as well because by the fact that we are backwards compatible, you can. If you artificially define NAPI version to be lower than what Node advertises it to be, then that continues to be true. Node does have a lower version number if you say Node has a lower version number, precisely because they are inclusive and backwards compatible.
So we're redefining an existing define.
Yes. Yes, I think it's a soft define because precisely to integrate with build systems. And now we're giving it even more teeth than they've had before, right? In that now, APIs will start to disappear if the version is lower, whereas until now the API was the same no matter what the version was defined as. And having it disappear like that actually makes sense because if you artificially define it to be lower, you're saying I'm pretending it's 1985, You know what I mean?
And you have to remember it's a preprocessor thing too. So like Node at runtime will still report the correct version.
Right. Yes.
It's just for code purpose, you're basically saying this code should act like it's NAPI
as
version.
If it were older, yes.
So it didn't seem necessary to me to create yet another pound define when like this one already exists and it'll do the right thing by default.
Exactly.
Like the node API.cc will be like, yeah, that's fine. That's we already see NAPI version. It's always the latest version defined when we're compiling the actual source. But the header requires some additional. Yeah, the header basically says, "Oh, nobody defined a NAPI version. Let me define one for you."
Right. I'm just wondering, can that ever get us into trouble? Would we ever use it internally so that it?
Ooh, we
I guess
shouldn't.
nothing
No,
should
no,
be.
no, 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 no. No, we shouldn't use it internally.
Well, that's sort of what I'm getting at. Like, if we already use it internally, then it could get us into trouble. But I guess we shouldn't be doing that. So.
No, no. I mean, internally, we always have the experimental stuff available, right? So it's never restricted.
So today, nappy version.h defines nappy underscore version 3. And then the only place we use it in code is just in the nappy property we add to the versions, which I think is fine to be on. Like, I think that reuse is fine.
That won't get us into trouble, but I'm
Right.
just wondering if there are cases where we might try and use it internally that would get us.
Nothing springs to mind, but I can think about it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think maybe let's just think a bit more about that. But
Okay.
I guess we'll go with that for now, right?
Okay. And to be clear, nappy underscore version is an integer value?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Okay, I will change the recommendation, and then if alarms come up, we can address it.
I mean, the compiler is also going to warn people that you're redefining a variable, right?
No. It's a
No, because it's always surrounded by an if not defined, then define.
Well,
but so it's. I haven't seen it in normal use because Node API.h never had a reference to Node. Doesn't have a nappy version included inside of it. So like. That's the whole point, is basically we're saying for normal building we define nappy version as the max, but externally you don't know unless you include node version.h, which I'm not even sure if is that part of the public API surface, I assume.
I think so.
So like if you include
when using nappy, you should just be using
node API.h most of the time. I don't actually think. Like you can always undef and then redef it if you really care. If there is a compiler warning.
Yeah, I just mean that those are kind of yucky. Like telling something where they're going to get a warning by default is.
No.
You wouldn't get it by default. Like you would be specifically having another reason to include node version.h, which I haven't seen any good reason to do that, especially because nappy, the whole point is that you shouldn't care about the node version.
Yeah, but isn't like node API.h has to use it to filter out what functions are available, doesn't it?
So what it does today is when we include node API.h in node API.cc, we already nappy version is actually already defined by the environment. Because it just happens to be, it's included in node internal.h if I'm remembering correctly. So like it picks it up from where it's included, and if you don't define, if you're in a situation where it doesn't get defined at all, then it falls back and says, well, I'm going to fall back to 3.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, I can't think of a specific problem, but. Yeah, let's think about it a bit more, but use that for now, it sounds like.
Okay.
Okay, and I think we've only got 5 minutes left. So enforce snappy version of module headers. I think we've probably talked a fair amount about that already.
Yep.
Burning down list of issues in the repo. I don't know if there's any specific things people want to bring up. We have had, I guess the one I'll mention is I am going to submit a PR for the documentation because our async worker API is a bit confusing, so we need to clarify that you can't do certain things in the execute.
Definitely.
So I'll definitely do that. I don't know if there's any other hot or concerning issues that people have seen out there.
Just the crash that we fixed recently. That's all. I don't actually know if it made it into 10.4 or not, because Miles he committed the 10.4 commit after mine, but I'm not sure if that automatically means that 10.4 contains it, because it was very, very close to the publishing date. But if not, it's going to be in 10.4.1 because it's Ember Micro. So
okay, and it was a regression in the 10 line, or does that need a backport?
Yes,
as well?
yes. It's very subtle. we have this macro that uses the environment, to call into a module. But if you just pass the environment into the macro, that's obviously text substitution, right? So if you're passing it in such a way that you're accessing a member of a class, and that class happens to be destroyed as part of the call, then afterwards you cannot really use it anymore, and that's why it was crashing. So you always need to copy it before you call the macro. I have actually half a mind of just putting the copy statement into the macro, like define a local variable, copy the value, and then use that in the macro. Because we've already had this twice, like once in the finalizer, because obviously the finalizer deletes something, and then and if you pass the environment as a member of that which gets deleted, you get the same crash. And we've had exactly such a crash earlier. And now the second time around, it's crashing in async. So
using the same macro.
Yeah. So I've put a big fat comment there saying that this is why I'm assigning the member variable to a local variable. But it might just be cleaner to just make it part of the macro.
And then if somebody uses the macro, we won't get the problem.
It'll be safe. Yeah, it'll be safe.
That makes sense. Yeah. But it was a regression in 10?
Yes, 10.2 because Anna introduced the thread pool work class, and so she refactored it. But and it was working before because I had put in that copy, but I had forgotten to put the big fat comment, and so Anna probably thought, why is this being copied to a local variable? And she just passed it in the macro.
Okay, so, got it.
So that's what happened there, but it's all fixed now, thankfully.
Okay, good. So unless there's any others in that are documentation push, I know there's a number of ones that we continue to push forward and review. Anything specifically to talk about on that front?
No, I just haven't had time to deal with the one constructor thing yet. I did a little bit of investigation into how to mark things deprecated in code because I would want it to generate a warning, but it seems like I needed to look around. I think we have examples in our code where that has been done. Or in the Node code. So I was gonna look around for a helpful macro, hopefully, that already exists. But I don't know.
And I reviewed. I believe it was Nicola's PR with async worker and error. That's looking pretty good.
Good. Okay, so yeah, hopefully we'll get those landed and move on to some of the others.
Yep.
Okay, so that's our time. Anything else we need to talk about before we end for today?
Can't think of anything else.
Okay, well, great. Lots of things going on. Progress being made on many fronts. Talk to you guys all next week.
All right, talk to you next week. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.